Hello, welcome to today's tutorial. We'll begin by looking at the UV editor and how we can use the tools within Maya to unwrap a model. Just to begin with, I'm going to create a box, and we'll keep this very simple, just so you can understand how you would create the UVs for this box. Now if I take this model, I want to be able to create a 2D representation of this model, so I can go and take this 2D representation into Photoshop to paint UVs on, or even take it into another 3D texturing package. Now we're not concentrating as much on texturing at the moment. We're just thinking about creating these islands, what we call the process of UV unwrapping. So what we're going to do is we're going to be mostly using this tool set here. So if you go onto Maya, you hit onto the UV options, and you'll see that you get this menu, and within that menu you can then choose different options to work with. If I go here and look at the UV editor, you get the option of clicking onto the UV editor, or you can click on this option here. You should have that, and it's the same. If I open that up, then that opens up the actual UV editor. Now to navigate in the UV editor is pretty much the same as Maya when you're doing it in 3D space, but just zoom in and out. It's just a scroll button. If you hold Alt down, you're again panning, and if you select anything straight away, you won't be able to select it. In order for you to select anything within this, you have to right click, and then you'll get an option of one of these: vertex, shells, edges, UVs or faces, and that will allow you to then select a component. For instance, if I select that reveals to me that I'm selecting this face here. So what we're seeing here is basically this model laid out. Any of the primitive shapes that you start off with, for instance, if I create another shape here, they already have they're already unwrapped for you to begin with. They're all the primitive shapes. They give you that, and then once you start modifying them, editing them, that means that you have to have a customized UV in mind. So what we're going to do is, just to understand this process better, what we're going to do is we're going to load a texture that I've already created. And we're going in this task we're going to match the faces onto that texture, and this will give us a better understanding, and we're going to utilize some of the tools that are there to unwrap. So before I do anything, I'll load up the texture. So the process of loading up a texture is pretty simple. So you've done this before with loading up reference images in here. So I'm just going to click a new material. So if you click on this, you'll see this Lambert 2 appears. That's the new material that I've just created. I'll just call it box texture for now. And inside the color channel here, the checker box, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go into File, and I'm going to load up the texture. The texture that I have included it into the resource files that I've uploaded, so please navigate to that. So I'm just going to navigate that on my system. And the file is called box texture. So, and it should look like this. So you're going to get a preview. So it's just a basic box, and it'll give you a preview of that. I'm going to hit open on that. You'll see that it's loaded up into the system there. I want to activate it on my laptop, so I'm going to hit number 6, so I can see it in my viewport. So if you hit number 6, you should be able to see the texture. Now if I clicked on this box, you can see that here's my UVs, laid out, and here's what I'm seeing inside the box. Now the task is now to make sure, try to rearrange these UVs so we can get a matching box size, or we can fit these UVs that I have with the box. Just to understand a bit more of the UV editor, what you can do is, for instance, if you click on this image here, on this button here, it'll turn off the image in the background so you can still see everything better. We'll just turn it off just so we can see some of the basic navigation. There's loads of different variations of the UV editor, and especially with Maya 2018, and they keep updating this as well, so the tools constantly change as well. We're going to be using some of these tools through this process, and we're going to be using also the polygon menu, so you can open that one up and just keep it on the side there. Actually, we'll open that up again later on. The other tools that we're going to be using at some point are tools such as this one, tool menu. We'll also be using that. A lot of these tools are already optimized here. You actually can see them. They are here, so you can break things up and use them. Mostly we're going to be sticking to the polygon UVs and the UV menu that we've already opened on this side. So for instance, what I can do is, if I select all these faces right now, if you'll see that if I double click on this is all one piece. It's already sewed. I can detach things, I can unsew things. That's something that is possible. I can rotate this around. You can see that I'm rotating the actual object around. I'm flipping it in this case. I can rotate it 90 degrees around like that, but it's all appearing as one object. I want to be able to separate these objects. Now, one way I can do this is to identify individually what each box is, what each element is, and then separate it. For instance, I would select this, and then in my polygon menu from here I can hit create a UV shell, and that will allow me to kind of separate that as a separate piece. There are also tools here that you can detach them by using the cut UV tool, and you'll see if I do that, it kind of separates the two pieces. We're not going to use that because just for the task now we need the scale to be consistent across all the islands that we're going to create. A quick way to do this will give us everything the way we want it, is to hit automatic mapping. Now automatic mapping is something that I tend to do a lot with a lot of models. Any environment models that you have, you might have a little building or a house or something. If you hit automatic mapping, what it'll do is it'll kind of automatically separate all the faces out for you based on the best planes that it can get. So if I hit automatic mapping, you'll see that it separates all the 4 different pieces for me, and it's using this flat planer all the way around. It's a bit like box mapping, and it's actually doing it from every angle, so it'll give you that. So for instance, if you had a house, you'll get the side and the front and all the pieces that are in between. Then you'll use these tools to stitch them up and whatever goes with that. So one of the things keep in mind here is if I take all these faces now, they're all separate, so that's done that for me. I want to keep the scale of these, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything and I'm going to just move these around. If your move option is not selected, just hit W, and WER is exactly the same as it using them in 3D space. I'm just going to move them to the side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my texture on. So if I just turn display my image so I can see my texture actually on, one of the things I can do is I'm just gonna scale this. So I'll hit R, and what I'll do is I'll just push these back roughly, and I'll scale them to the roughly the size, so I can see that they're the sizes of the thickness and the size of each one of these. So it's quite big there, so I'm just scaling it down. I've got all the faces selected. This is just giving me a unified kind of feel to it, so I don't have to adjust things individually for each component. So that way now each one of my faces have been scaled down the right way. But because this is a simple shape, of course it's really easier to unwrap and see where everything is. When you're unwrapping, it can become tedious depending on what object you're wrapping. Some objects are much more harder to unwrap, others are much more straightforward. Usually, which are quite straightforward, are your box shapes like houses can be much easier to unwrap. But you have to just always think about faces that are hidden and then unwrap those separately. And what you use is you kind of tend to either use automatic, you can use your cylindrical mapping, planar mapping, and we're going to be using these later on when we're unwrapping another part of the model, another model. But just for now, what we're going to start doing is we're going to start. we'll choose a face, and what we'll do is we'll start with the bottom face because it'll be easier for us to control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this along the line here, so it gives me a rough idea where this is. Okay, actually let me just rescale this again, because we might as well make it a bit more accurate, because as you can see that we're going to move that here. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to make this so it fits there. It's just that if I take my time and just do it a little bit more cleaner, I don't have to adjust anything later on. So if I just move this back now, you can see that I've decided that this is going to be my starting point, and there's my bottom of my box. If I click on this edge here, if I right click and go into my edge, before I was on faces, if I right click now, I go onto my edge, I can now see, if I select that, this is my face that should go here. So if I hit move and so, if I can just move this polygon menu open, actually I'll just open it again. If I hit move and so edge, you see this face here jumped. Let me just undo that again and do that again. So if I go polygon, move and so, you see this face jump from here to there. So you can see that's in the right place. Let me try to do the same on this side. Oh, just press something there. And I'll do the same again, and you see that my other side of my board is there. I'll do the same on this. Just press G now, because we're just repeating command here. Oh, that's not working for some reason. Let's keep this open. Move and so edge, and I'll do the same with this. Yep, and I'll also do the same again on this. Now if I go around my box, that's my box unwrap to the texture that I've already created. Hopefully this will give you an understanding of how, on a primitive shape, how do you create a 2D representation. Now if I take my texture off, you can see that this is the faces that I've created. So I've established what my bottom face is, what my top face is, on my right faces, and I can see what I'm doing in terms of making that model. So I'm just gonna duplicate this, Control D, and move this to a side. And what we can do in the next part of the tutorial is just we can use this unwrap that we've done. What we've established is that this is our bottom, this is our front, this is our side, so we know what each face is. And once you know what each face is, you can then take that as a map and texture it, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next video.